And welcome to Facebook Live. Ricardo Lecompte, Doug Mouton. We did this last week. This is week 2 of doing this because the Saints are so wildly popular right now. Always popular, but exceptionally popular when they're in the playoff hunt like they are right now. All right, look, if you have any comments or questions that you want to ask us, drop them in. We'll get to them at some point during this Facebook Live. All right, Ricardo, let's start with the big news today. And the idea of doing this on Wednesday is because we actually do start knowing stuff. Looking forward to the week. We'll talk about the Panthers in a minute, but first the Saints. Injury report comes out. We get to see a little bit of practice. And the injury report comes out. It turns out Marshon Lattimore, Ken Crawley, both limited today. They didn't practice at all last week. Didn't play, of course, against the Rams. Clearly very lost. Big news today, getting them back, even if it's limited, right?
Yeah, just getting them on the practice field and knowing that at least they have a potential to play Sunday, which
right.
which is big news because last week you could see when they were playing against a good Rams defense that they were missing. Even though P.J. Williams played well, you saw Devontae Harris struggle a little bit against the Rams.
Sure.
And when you get someone like Lattimore who potentially could be Defensive Rookie of the Year back on the field, that's always a big news for defense. And as we start talking about the Panthers, you may not have to worry about the passing game as much this, like you did last week against the Rams. But it's good to have them on the field, especially when you need to take out whoever the number one receiver is, which Marshon Lattimore does very well, which he's been doing all season.
No question about it. Pro Football Focus, it's an analytic website. They grade players every play of every NFL game. They have Marshon Lattimore as the 4th best cornerback in the NFL this season. That's not the 4th best rookie. That's the 4th best cornerback, period. And Ken Crawley was the guy. His interception in Miami is sort of what jump-started this whole run of defense, which that was win 2 of the 8-game win streak. Sort of kick-started all of it. They have been able to take away Lattimore by himself takes away half the field. Missing the 2 of them is what really killed the Saints against the Rams. And yes, as Ricardo said, not as big as the Rams with Carolina. Carolina's 17th in the NFL in total offense. They're 24th in passing, 5th in running. Clearly what they have wanted to do for as long as they've had Cam Newton is to run right at you, right?
That's the whole makeup of that offense. It's basically what Cam does, and it's the threat of him running or being able to run opens up everything else because it's another person you have to take account for. So if Cam is running the ball, then it's like, all right, you have to come up in the box. Then he's able to throw over there, throw to Devin Funchess, throw to Christian McCaffrey, who is like an Alvin Kamara clone right there, the same way they utilize him, the same way that the Saints utilize Kamara. Cam is the thing that gets this whole going with this offense. It's Cam being able to have that dual threat, being able to run, and he leads the team in rushing touchdowns with 5 this season. So it's the run game and everything starts with Cam. Everything is about the game, and he's playing a lot better than he did in that Week 3 matchup against the Saints.
Yeah, no question about it.
Especially on this 4-game winning streak that the Panthers are on currently.
And I think he plays his best when he actually does run the ball. You hate to have your quarterback run as much as he does, but he's the one guy who can get away with it physically. And talking about injuries, the one thing that came out Wednesday when you talk about the Carolina offense, Devin Funchess, who's their number 1 receiver, did not practice on Wednesday. He was out. Christian McCaffrey, who's their guy who's getting the ball a ton, both catching and running, he didn't practice at all today either. And Greg Olsen, the tight end, who's one of the best pass-catching tight ends in the NFL, did not practice. Now, obviously we'll have to see how that plays out. Just because they don't practice on Wednesday, that does not mean they won't play on Sunday, but it's certainly an indication. You saw it with the Saints. It certainly raises red flags because if you're not practicing by Friday, then you're not playing on Sunday. So that's why getting guys back limited, you're not out of the woods yet. They could still not play, but you're a lot better off than if they don't practice at all.
Yeah, and you had Thomas Davis and Julius Peppers on the injury report too, but generally what Ron Rivera likes to do on Wednesdays is give the vets rest days.
Sure.
So, even though Thomas Davis was listed with, I think it was a hamstring or whatever on there, it's a rest day for him.
Right.
And Olsen is probably the biggest question mark for the Panthers getting him back because that's Cam Newton's safety valve. And if he came out of last week's game against the Jets with that injury, he was coming back with the foot.
Sure.
So we got to see if he's going to play, and if Carolina and Cam does not have that weapon at tight end, then they could be in a little trouble just in terms of what they're doing offensively.
And the one guy I want to talk about with you is Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara. Kamara, the 3rd-round pick. McCaffrey, the 1st-round pick, came with all the Heisman contender hype. Kamara came with none of it. And looking at numbers, looking at it by the eyeball test, whatever criteria you want to use, Alvin Kamara has been an infinitely better player than Christian McCaffrey so far. Agreed?
I do agree, and it's funny. I had this discussion. I had some friends who are Panthers fans, so we had this discussion: who's better, Alvin Kamara or Christian McCaffrey?
Who would you want to have if you could take either one now?
This is the thing, and this is the favorite. And I'll pose this question to you: would Christian McCaffrey put the same numbers Alvin Kamara did if he was playing in Sean Payton's offense?
No, I don't think so. Alvin Kamara is slippery and elusive in a way. In a back that I'm not sure I've ever seen a Saints back that is quite like. Look, the Saints have had some great backs in their time. Deuce was an amazing player. In my lifetime, what I like to say is the most talented running back to ever play for the Saints was Chuck Muncie, a guy who obviously had a lot of off-the-field problems, but in a one-game situation, he was the original Leonard Fournette.
Yeah.
He could run over you, he could run around you, was enormously talented. The Saints have had, George Rogers in their time. Dalton Hilliard and Reuben Mays were great, but none of them are quite like Kamara.
Yeah.
Kamara gets away from people. Nobody has been able to hit him solidly. He is slippery and elusive, has been far better running between the tackles than I would have guessed, and in open space. We saw it this past week. The Rams did a spectacular job of tackling. They were an amazing tackling team.
But
couldn't touch Alvin Kamara. And that's the thing. And Kamara today was just fun to listen to, wasn't it?
It was fantastic. I think he had one bite where just all the sound of him just talking about, he was, they're asking about him hurling guys and doing this, and how do you avoid people when you're on the field or whatever, and he's basically, well, I'm thinking about trying to do this, and it was funny because he does something where he's like, I'm thinking about maybe pulling a matrix move on these guys.
Right.
So I'm lining up these three guys, going 1, 2, 3. I'm going to do this and this, and then he said something along the lines of, I'm thinking about doing that, and that's what I was thinking about doing.
Right.
It was a perfect comparison because it was like, did he just say that? Yes, he just said that.
He came in the most likable guy in rookie minicamp, talking about what he could learn from Adrian Peterson and Mark Ingram. He has been likable and easy to get along with. You could just tell he's a good locker room guy, and the Saints have gone out of their way since the fiasco maybe of 14 and how things sort of spiraled in the locker room, of getting guys like Kamara who are good locker room guys, and you see it on the field. And Kamara has been, to me, maybe the biggest surprise in the NFL, because he was a guy, anybody who says they expected this out of Kamara this year is crazy, because 32 NFL teams passed on him 2 times and then 2.5 times before the Saints drafted him. If anybody knew he was going to be this good, he would have gone higher. And he's been amazing.
Absolutely. And Christian McCaffrey got all of the pub coming out, but rightfully so, because of what he was doing in his production at Stanford. And even with the Panthers, he's starting to get his groove too. Because remember, you are adjusting from playing in college ball to going to the NFL. The thing that Christian is able to do well with the Panthers is that he's so versatile in the same way Kamara is, because he's also returning kicks, returning punts as well, something that Kamara doesn't do. So it's one of those where it's like he's getting his footing. He's so versatile. Ron Rivera is able to use him and Mike Shula, when they're calling plays, are able to kind of use them similar that Sean Payton's using Kamara. But again, you wouldn't have expected Kamara to have the production that he's had. 7.1 yards a carry on a touch.
It's crazy.
7.1.
Yeah, 7.
That is insane.
It really is. And I will tell you this, and I'm not in any way dismissing Christian McCaffrey. I think he's going to be a terrific player for a long time. And obviously, 11 games into the rookie year, you're going to sign a 4-year contract or a 5-year contract for McCaffrey right off the bat. Yes, you're going to be judged in years 2 and 3 and 4 who's the better player. But if you ask me right now, straight up, nothing else considered, who would I rather have, Kamara or McCaffrey? I'd take Kamara.
I would take Kamara as well.
And he was a 3rd-round pick.
And everybody in our discussion took Alvin Kamara as well, except the Panthers fan. He was like, no, it's Christian McCaffrey all the way.
Really?
Yeah. But to be
that's
fair,
someone not seeing logic, and someone who hasn't seen Kamara.
Haven't seen Kamara as much as we have been able to see him.
Do we have any questions? Or
we do. We have a few of the same questions. I know the injury report came out earlier this afternoon. Is Lattimore and Crawley coming back? And will they
look, here's the way injury reports work, and I think maybe we take it for granted because we see them every week. And they don't. In the old days, they'd give an injury report and it'd say probable, questionable. They used to give terms like that. They don't do that in the NFL anymore. Now, it's more a participation report. So on Wednesday, NFL teams are required to list all players that have an injury that are either not participating at all are limited in their participation, meaning they're on the field, but they're not doing everything. Maybe not doing the full go drills, but doing a lot of the sort of jogging or 3/4 speed drills. Mm-hmm. And then sometimes you can list guys who have an injury but are full participants. Mm-hmm. And so that comes out on Wednesday. Then on Thursday, you're required to update it for all the players you listed Wednesday, or if there's any new guys. And then on Friday, you update it again. So it comes out 3 times, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's a participation report. Now, Sean Payton has said 100 times that he is only going to release the information and an injury report that he's required to by the NFL. And who can blame him? Everybody wants a competitive advantage, and he's not going to give the other guy an advantage.
And every coach does that.
And every coach does that. He'll say if you're... Now, look, there are guys, if it's an Achilles and you're out for the year, there are guys that they'll say, no, he's out. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, for guys like that, Sean Payton won't even get asked that question, because the reporters in New Orleans will all know he's not going to answer it, because through the course of the last few years, we've asked it from time to time, and he's not going to answer it. So Sean Payton will not say today the possibility that those guys will play. So it becomes conjecture. Now, these guys are out on the field today, and they're not doing a lot, so it's hard to get a great gauge. But the fact that they're out on the field in a limited way means something. Last Wednesday, they were non-participants. They did not practice Wednesday. Today, they're limited. So today, they're one notch ahead of where they were last week at this time. The goal is to have them practicing by Friday. And even if they're limited Friday, they could play. The goal is for them not to be out. And they're already not out. I hope that makes sense. It's an extremely positive sign. But when I say you're not out of the woods, you're not guaranteed of them playing, you don't know that yet. But it is an extremely positive sign, because you need them to be not out. And already on Wednesday, they're not out. They're limited. Did I explain that where it makes sense?
Yeah, you did. And just kind of build on that, it's a good sign if you do not see them on the do not participate. Because last week they did not participate at all.
Wednesday, Thursday, Friday,
they did not participate. So the fact that they're limited is a good sign. It doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play Sunday, but it's a good sign if they're at least participating in practice. It's steps to getting back onto the field. Now, they could be limited all Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Then come Sunday, that's when you see the inactives before the game, and then you'll know for sure. But it's a great sign that at least they practice. And that's the most important thing for Saints fans out there for these injuries with Lattimore and Crawley, is that they did participate. Not fully, but at least they're on the field.
And the one thing that's interesting about the injuries, too, and Kenny Vaccaro said this 2 weeks ago, he could have played and didn't, and the Saints were being extra cautious with him, and maybe with Lattimore and Crawley there was some of that dealt in. The Saints have gotten a bad knock over the last few years about bringing guys back too soon, maybe when they're hurt. And the way Kenny Vaccaro described it, he said, they want me right for the stretch run. This team already recognizes that their season does not end on December 31st.
This is the stretch run.
I was looking up at the schedule on the wall. December 31st is the last game of the season, but the Saints know that's not the end of the season. They want these guys healthy and ready in January in the playoffs, and I think they've got an eye towards that. And maybe Lattimore and Crawley, if last week had been a playoff game, might have played. We don't know that, but maybe. But we'll see. The Saints have been cautious. Yeah. That's not a bad thing at this point.
Throw in this factor, too. It is a short week for the Saints as well.
Right, the next week.
Because they play Sunday, and then they turn right around Thursday. So if they're not at 100% for this Panthers game, you're thinking as a coaching staff for these players, do we just want to hold them out till Thursday? Do we want to give them extra week because we get that extra days before we play the Jets afterwards? You're at this point right now where if they're not at 100%, do you want to push them in a big game, or do you say, let's play them there, then we just don't play them Thursday, but then you need them Thursday for even a bigger game against the Falcons?
Right, so yes. And I'll say this, you'll hear a lot about how the Panthers run the ball. Having your 2 cornerbacks back, even against a running team, is enormously important, because what those 2 guys can do, especially Lattimore, is if they're not playing, you got to roll extra help to those guys. You got to give them safety help. If it's Lattimore, you don't, meaning you can dedicate an extra safety up into the box. You can play the run different if you have cornerbacks you trust. It was the biggest thing that went wrong with the Saints last year when they had all the injuries at cornerback, when it was Delvin Breaux and Keenan Lewis and Damian Swan and P.J. Williams, the first 4 cornerbacks all went down. It made the Saints play zone in a way where they couldn't be aggressive on defense, and they could never be the team they wanted to be. So even against a running team, you want to get at least one of those guys back so you can play the run better by leaving those corners on an island. If you don't have Lattimore and Crawley, you really don't have anybody you can totally trust to lead by themselves. You got to give them extra help, and you can't play the run with the full out that you can if they're not playing.
Yeah, and then you look ahead to Thursday's game. If you look down the road to a passing Falcons team with Matt Ryan and company and Julio Jones, where you're like, okay, if Lattimore can't play on this against Carolina, we definitely need him back.
Oh, you definitely
need someone to lock up Julio Jones,
because they have nobody on the roster who can play Julio Jones but him, and Lattimore against Julio Jones. And if we don't see it then, we'll see it 2 weeks later when they come back here to the Dome. That has the potential of being one of the great corner wideout matchups that you could ever see. All right, we got anything else?
You guys kind of partially answered the next question, which was how will the Saints play against the Falcons? How do you guys think? So you kind of touched on that a little bit.
The short week is always tricky.
Yeah,
it's one of those where you look at this stretch run right now. You're like, if you get one victory out of this little tight window these two games, then that's a win for the Saints.
Yeah, I think so too. Look, the Saints and the Falcons is going to be really interesting in Atlanta. You play them twice. Honestly, you could split with them and be just fine. This one against Carolina is big. I think as we look towards Atlanta, which it's not that far away, I think Marshawn Lattimore is the single biggest factor in that game. Julio Jones is having a better year than people think. He's at 1,000 yards. Maybe he hasn't made the highlight reels as much, but his numbers are great. The Falcons are hitting their stride right now. There's a Super Bowl hangover is a real thing. If you were watching the Saints in 2010, you know it. The Super Bowl hangover is a real thing.
I'd even go Carolina when they went 15-1, lost the Super Bowl 6-10, didn't make the play.
No question.
It's a thing.
It is a real thing.
Yes.
And Atlanta, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, has started to wake up from it. And so, to me, beating Carolina this week is so important, because if you can do that, it almost buys you another mulligan, and then you can split with the Falcons. I like the Saints' chances this week. At this point, I would love to see or to feel better about at least one of those corners playing. But I love the Saints' chances this week.
I think that Week 3 matchup wasn't a fluke. I think that's...
No, I agree.
I think it's just, for the Panthers' standpoint, playing the Saints, especially how they're rolling, it's a bad matchup for the Panthers.
I think it is, too.
It just is. And I think they'll have just as much success on Sunday than they did in Week 3.
I'm with Ricardo on that one. All right, look, thank you for tuning in to Facebook Live. We're going to be back next Wednesday. We're going to do this every Wednesday for the rest of the season. As the injury report comes out, there's big news, and we'll be following the Lattimore-Crawley, especially, injury situation throughout the week on Eyewitness News. Thanks for watching.